So acclaimed filmmaker Michael Mann revamps his iconic 1980s TV series with a contemporary brooding style that invited a wide spectrum of critiques. So let's see where everything ultimately lands for me. So take an in-depth look at the 2006 update of Miami Vice. In the middle of an undercover sting at a nightclub, Miami Vice detectives James Sonny Crockett and Ricardo Tubbs received a panic call from a former informant, Alonzo Stevens. Fearing the worst, they contacted FBI Special Agent in charge Fujima, who reluctantly informs them that Stevens was hooked into an interagency drug trafficking operation. Amidst this, a deal goes awry when the Aryan suppliers learn their buyers are FBI undercovers and brutally murder them. Distraught after hearing from Sonny and Rico that his wife Leonetta was killed as well, Alonzo throws himself in front of a semi-truck. Ultimately, Fujima, alongside Lieutenant Castillo, meet with Crockett and Tubbs to recruit them for a transnational operation, knowing that Fujima's interagency task force is compromised. They learn that they can pose as transportation for drug trafficker Jose Hierro, who supplies the South Florida group. But first they must take out his current smugglers by jacking their load and destroying their go-fast boats. Through informant Nicholas, the Vice Squad are able to link up with Jose Hierro as their deeply layered undercover identities. As they arrive in Haiti, they meet with Hierro in a tense standoff, only to discover he works for Archangel de Jesus Montoya, whose global organization goes well beyond drug running. They also encounter Isabella, Montoya's business manager, whom Crockett begins to forge an infatuation with. Once the first load is run in, Sonny and Rico negotiate a further partnership after they convince Hierro and Isabella that they recovered the previous load that they themselves hijacked. While Hierro remains skeptical, Isabella gives them an even bigger shipment to run in. However, Sonny follows an impulse to court Isabella, and she obliges. As they head out to the open water, she has them head to Havana for mojitos and dancing. The outing, though, escalates as they get increasingly intimate with one another, both in and out of bed. This leads Sonny to negotiate a new deal that hooks him and Rico in deeper, which stretches the mission beyond where Fujima is comfortable with, but is leaned on by Castillo to let it proceed. However, Crockett's passion for Isabella attracts the ire and scrutiny of Jose Hierro, who orchestrates a betrayal with the next load. Trudy is abducted by the Aryans to a trailer park and wired up with an explosive that will be detonated if this load isn't delivered their way. The team then coordinates efforts to both delay the shipment and lead a tactical rescue. Yet when everything goes awry, Hierro detonates the explosive, putting Trudy in critical condition. Crockett is soon able to force Hierro to come to Miami to reclaim his product, giving the Vice team the chance to take him down. But with Isabella in the crossfire, the truth of their ill-fated relationship will have to reveal itself. So Miami Vice saw its U.S. theatrical release on July 28, 2006. Obviously, it was based on the popular 1980s TV series, which ran for 112 episodes from 1984 to 1989, and starred Don Johnson, Philip Michael Thomas as Detective Sonny Crockett and Ricardo Tubbs, respectively, and became so just defining of the entire 1980s, the neon, the pastels, the popular music, the thing completely injected the entire damn decade. When you think 1980s, so much the way people kind of look back on it's like, that was the style. Miami Vice kind of got that right into the injection of pop culture here, and through executive producer Michael Mann, he completely revolutionized television, bringing cinematic visuals and cinematic techniques into the storytelling of the series here that we continue to kind of reap the benefits of today. It was so groundbreaking how it changed how you could do television, such higher production values, all these very intense, sort of groundbreaking stories it told throughout the entire series, did amazing things. And when Michael Mann got handled the actual script for the pilot through writer Anthony Yerkovich, who had a very strong track record through Starsky and Hutch, Heart to Heart, and Hill Street Blues. He kind of wanted to actually make it a feature film back in the 80s, but it had already been optioned by NBC, and so they went ahead with the entire series, and just so much of what Mann was as a filmmaker got injected into the style and the storytelling techniques of the entire show. And Michael Mann is a filmmaker who does evolve over time. As the years pass, he kind of refines his ideas. He does mature as things go along, from like Thief to Manhunter up to The Last Mohicans and Heat and The Insider, Ali, Collateral. All these films show different phases of how he adapts and approaches different themes and different subject matter, different things he goes on, and he just kind of moves along with it different times. So when he comes up to the mid-2000s, and after he does Collateral, he wants to revisit Miami Vice, and it's like kind of the interesting type of thing in the whole thing is how the film got marketed in a certain way and how he is actually making the actual film. Because if you go back and watch all the trailers, they're really kind of promoting it as like a slick, fast-paced, energetic, exciting type of action type of film. All this cool, sleek, sexy stuff going on. It's not really that type of film. There's not a whole lot of action in the film. It is much more of a dark crime thriller drama. All these different things where the marketing was trying to push it so fast, like slick and hip and all these different things. It wasn't exactly what Mann was going for. They were more marketing quite the film that he made. And what he was approaching it as, like, I'm not going back and being a nostalgia fest. I'm taking Miami Vice kind of like, where can I take the property now and kind of show a much more gritty, realistic style of how this sort of Vice undercover type of work kind of goes, and actually, as he typically always did, talk with actual people in that field of expertise. You talk to actual undercover people in like the DEA and Vice Squads and stuff like that to actually understand how all the mechanics work out with all the undercover work and all the drug trade and everything like that. All these very involved parts that kind of get the realism of everything down. Because he wanted to tell something that was dark, gritty, and realistic. He wasn't going to make Miami Vice like it was Bad Boys or something like that. He wasn't going to make that type of film. He was making something that felt in line with his filmography. Felt in line with something like Collateral and Heat and stuff like that. It felt very contemporary and up to date and stuff like that. So how they marketed the film wasn't exactly what he was intending to give the audiences. So you can see how when the thing got released in the summer of 2006, it didn't quite hit the mark. There were a lot of mixed reviews and stuff like that. There were some people who really did put like some of their best films of the year list, but the box office didn't speak so well because it only garnered back $164 million off of a budget that was pretty much confirmed by the studio to be about $135 million. And that was because a lot of things went over schedule and over budget on the entire film, and there was a lot of very heavy production problems behind the scenes of this thing that really hindered the film in a lot of different ways, just like in terms of like shooting the actual script they had and how the fact that Michael Mann in various situations was rewriting the script as they went along, and a lot of different things went on in this whole thing to really kind of not make it the film that he really intended to make it from the beginning. And one of those things was the fact that they were shooting a very stormy hurricane season where they reportedly lost 7 days of production time due to 3 different hurricanes, one of them being Katrina, and the fact that some of the crew kind of reportedly said they were filming in very unsafe weather conditions. But Michael Mann kind of much more states that they only shot up to a point where they felt like things got too threatening. So once things felt like they got too far along, they would shut down production and they would stop filming. So he kept a certain calculated sense about that. But when you get into the whole thing where they were shooting in South America, things get a lot more dicey because a lot of the locations they chose to film in was against the better judgment of the local police. Like certain areas where the local police just would not go. And so they kind of reportedly employed local gang members and brought in other random, like private security to kind of guard the production. And things got a little bit more friction on that type of way. It's like everyone felt a little unsettled, a little unsafe, just like they're pushing it in a certain way where Mann does a lot of this type of stuff. Like on Collateral, he took Jamie Foxx to certain places in Los Angeles that he never even knew existed and scarier than any place he'd ever seen before. So he's not a director who kind of has a hesitation about that type of stuff. He wants to grasp as much of a reality and the darkness and the unsettling nature of where they're going with the story. So he shoots in a lot of the practical places to get that certain sense of the community, the culture, the environment, all these different things, but a little bit on the dangerous side because there was a certain incident where a local police officer who was drunk at the time wandered off to the set and encountered one of the security officers and ended up getting shot. Different reports say whether or not he survived the shooting, but the fact of the matter is this caused a major problem with the entire production that goes along that altered the entire third act of the entire film. Because Jamie Foxx would not go back to the South America. He would not go back to where they were filming. He got completely scared off. And there was a lot of different problems with Jamie Foxx as well once I get to talking about him and his performance and his contributions to the entire film that also caused a lot of different problems with the entire production. This is just the tip of the iceberg. But transitioning over to how Michael Mann chose to photograph the entire film, he continued on his digital cinematography used on Collateral, but pushed it even further this time because he only used Super 35mm film for underwater shots and some high-speed photography. Everything else is digital because he used the same Thomson Viper film stream camera and a Sony Cine Alta model as well for all this HD footage. And so he kind of paired up with Dion Beebe, who ended up doing most of the work on Collateral after the original cinematographer departed, but they still do a great job of this whole thing because the main thing Mann wanted to do with the digital cinematography on this film is to make, even though you can still see greatly into the night and you make great use of all the stuff they use for nighttime photography here, he wanted the audience to look at daylight in a very harsh manner. Because a lot of the daylight scenes are all very high contrast, high saturation. Some of the highlights are very much blown out. So it's like, it feels like it's very exposed. When you're in the daylight, you're much more exposed. It's a little bit more harder to hide who you are in a certain way. So you get in the cover at night, everything's a little bit more subdued. You got a little bit of grain here and there, stuff like that. You still use it to a great effect. I love how the nighttime looks so much through the entire film. It has that great depth of field and all these different things you could do with that sort of low light capability he had on these cameras. It looks fantastic. A lot of the things where they are using a great deal of handheld in this whole thing very, very strategically. Very much in a way like they're making sure that this is adding to the urgency and the intensity of the entire film. Where like they never even like put down like a tripod or terribly like a dolly shot, and definitely doesn't even sound like they even use a Steadicam anywhere. They're very much focused on so much of the handheld camera movement with that wide angle lens to give a certain sense of unease in the entire thing. Everything just kind of like, everything's a little bit foreboding, a little bit unsettling in a certain way. How they're getting deeper and deeper into these dangerous areas, they're getting into these far more threatening situations. It's like the camera work aids towards the vibe and the mood and everything like that, and everything is lit and shot in a certain way, adds further to that in these interesting sequences, and they still got gorgeous moments. Like the entire thing where you've got Crockett and Isabella on the speedboat, and you just got the wide landscape of just the ocean opening up. Looks absolutely gorgeous. The entire thing with the aerial photography throughout the entire film. There is that beautiful daylight stuff or later on when they're racing the speedboats in with the loads and everything like that. All this fantastic type of stuff. Just like Michael Mann is one of those filmmakers, like, you give this guy a helicopter, he's going to create some of the best looking cinematography you've ever seen from an aircraft. Looks absolutely fantastic every single time. But it's like Dion Beebe just like nailed something so very interesting in this thing where definitely does fall off differently. When you're going in thinking Miami Vice, you're not thinking about this style or this look or this approach. You're looking for something, a certain slickness like they're showing in the trailers, but how they put the thing together aids towards what Michael Mann was going for. That style, that intensity, that gritty edge of the entire thing, it hits up so very well in that regard. But despite the stylistic departures from the TV series, Mann actually took the basis of this story from an episode of the series called Smuggler's Blues, which is named after a song from Glenn Frey, who actually guest stars in the episode as a smuggler pilot, where Crockett and Tubbs have to go under this sort of transnational undercover operation and deal with like this Colombian drug lord or something like that, and then Trudy gets kidnapped and put in a trailer park where there's a bomb hooked up to her and stuff like that. So it's like all those beats, even lines of dialogue, are still recycled into the film. So it's like, it's very interesting type of thing how he did kind of look back at the series, see what stories could be updated and kind of use certain things. Also, still reflect on different themes that are used throughout the entire series and kind of bring that into the film and kind of fold it into the entire thing. So it's like, it's very much a revelation type of thing to go back, watch that episode. It's like, yeah, like there's like transplanted like almost certain scenes and certain beats and certain things going on. They're like exact sort of almost one-to-one replicas into the film. And it's such a thing how Mann just maintains throughout the entire film this sort of dark, brooding, dangerous, sort of bleak atmosphere in the entire film. There's always an edge to everything going on. Not so much it would exhaust the audience, but it's like you always know what the stakes are, what the risks are, all these different things, and how they're slightly pushing things on a different track in a way where it could lead towards a dangerous end. If they don't play things right in a certain way, things go very, very bad. And just like, what I love most about this whole film, the first 20 minutes of the theatrical cut are fantastic. I love so much how Mann decided for that theatrical experience, it just drops you right into the nightclub. Just drops you right in the middle of the whole thing, and that's something that Michael Mann is such a master of. I've seen other filmmakers attempt to do that, and they don't do it anywhere close as good as he does. Where he can just drop you into a moment, and it has enough of the visual clues and all the little seeds of certain things to start putting the pieces together of what's going on. Who's who, who's doing what, how the entire thing has come together. I love so much how that creates that urgency and that energy right up front. The entire first 20 minutes of the film are excellent. The pace is tight. The urgency is right on the cusp of everything. You get all the sense of the danger and all the deadly, lethal type of stuff going on. All the different things, the foreboding of all the stuff that's building up. It's just an incredible groundwork to lay out all the beats of the story that you have to follow along. Sets up everything perfectly. And then you move into all the other things that start building up, where you get into Nicholas and you get into Jose Hierro and all the other stuff. You're moving into all the other international things they have to deal with and start building up the entire undercover sting to get in with as a transpo for Hierro and getting deeper into finding out about Montoya and all these different things. It does fall on a very solid path. It does fall on stuff where I do feel like there's maybe a little bit of an ebb and flow in a certain way. Some things are kind of lose my attention in a certain way, but certain things, like when I start getting back up into Sonny and getting in with him and Isabella and stuff like that, there starts to build up a little more traction in the entire film. When you get back into Sonny, it feels a little bit more emotionally involved in a certain way. I think the film just starts picking up its pace and getting a little bit more traction going on. When they have to go through a little bit of the clinical steps of certain things, it gets a little less than interesting for me, but once you start dealing with the characters and start getting into more of those machinations in a certain way, those mechanics of the story, it becomes more interesting for me. But there are certain things like, okay, Sonny and Rico don't really get, aside from that one scene right before the third act, where they have that sit down and they're kind of talking about things before they go off and meet with Hierro, stuff like that. You don't really get that great sense of the two of them together outside of the undercover identities. You don't really get a sensibility of how they feel about each other, how they feel about certain things, and certain sensibility. All you have to go on is the chemistry that Colin Farrell and Jamie Foxx do hit off between each other. I do think they do show off a certain camaraderie on screen that I feel like it is functioning. It is very good. I don't think it's excellent. I think we've definitely seen better in that regard, but I think they are very good on hitting a wave like between the two of them, hitting back and forth, but a lot of their scenes are very minimal. Minimal dialogue interaction, stuff like that. They don't have to really speak a lot, but we don't get a lot of like insight into their deeper relationship, their deeper history or something like that. All we know is that there's a sort of unstated bond between them, and Rico will always stand next to Sonny and back him up on certain things. You get that sensibility that they are long-standing partners. You do get that feeling that they will look out for each other and kind of tell each other when they are going a little bit further off the reservation in a certain way, but always want to make sure they're both on the same page to a certain degree. So it's a very sort of subtle type of thing how Mann decides to play with their performances and how he characterizes them, where it does slightly revamp the characters from the TV series. Does a little bit of things here and there, but you got all these different things that go off very well in terms of how you progress the story here and how you get into this entire thing with Sonny and Isabella here, which is very much kind of more of a focus, more the emotional focus of the entire story. You got the entire thing where you're dealing with the transnational drug running and all these different things going on and the interagency leaks in terms of the task force, but the emotional core of the story is that relationship, and it is very much a doomed to fail romance, but I think there is so many really good moments played to give that sort of a thread, give you something to pull you through the story here, to get you emotionally involved with it. And as I said, Michael Mann did a little bit of a light revamp on all the characters here to kind of just make it a little bit more contemporary, or just have a different sort of angle on the relationships, or who they are, where they are in their lives, but still kind of relied on a little bit of the groundwork the TV series built up there, the kind of cultural knowledge of the characters, dropping you right into that nightclub at the beginning of the film. You use that pre-existing knowledge of the series and who the characters are to kind of fill in the blanks of what's going on in the scene and kind of identify who is who and who's doing what. So you still relied a little bit on that type of thing to not make it as cold of a disconnect in a certain way, but you still use the groundwork of the TV series to build up an entirely different style of story here and different approach to the different characters here. Like Colin, I think Colin Farrell's a fantastic actor. When he really gets material that can really accentuate his strengths, he's absolutely fantastic. Sometimes not so much. Sometimes he gets certain scripts and certain projects that didn't quite work, like the Total Recall remake. Wasn't doing anyone any favors. But the fact of the matter is, Colin Farrell, when he really gets something this good from a guy like Michael Mann or various other filmmakers, stuff like that, he can really accentuate a lot of good elements. And the fact is, he's not playing Don Johnson here. This is a different version of the same character here, but with a little bit of a different interpretation. So you're not going to get the exact same thing, but there are sort of shades, sort of echoes of what you knew as Sonny Crockett from the series. Like, I like so much early in the film when he is in the nightclub, he goes up to the bartender or whatnot, the lady there, and he kind of hits on her a little bit, kind of like, it shows that a little bit of that charm there. That's very much Sonny Crockett there. You get that certain sensibility, like, that's very identifiable as the character that you knew. And he gets a little bit of that here and there. It's like, sprinkles it in every so often, and you don't really get like all this type of stuff where the TV series had a lot of time to tell a lot of backstory and stuff like that, where the characters were, who they were before this, what kind of relations they had outside of the job here and there. A very kind of specific snapshot of these characters right here in this moment here. So we're not going through the motions of trying to bog down the story to explain all that type of stuff to kind of, does that stuff from the TV series still have any sort of resonance here? It's like, it's not necessary terribly for the story that we're telling here to really get that deep into the different things. You're getting the way the actors portray the characters, like Colin Farrell carries himself as Sonny here, because you can see there's a little bit of a weight on the character, and I think maybe because Colin Farrell was about 30 years older this time, and they actually made Crockett about 6 years older than he was at the time, and obviously like the beard stubble and the mustache, feels like they are trying to visually age him up to a certain degree. Because he still has when he was all shaven and stuff like that, in this point in time, he looked very, very young. So obviously they are trying to age him up a little bit, make him look a little bit older than he probably was, because Jamie Foxx, despite looking very youthful, was actually like 7 years older than Colin Farrell at the time. So it's kind of the interesting thing, trying to get that sort of level up type of thing, and give a little bit of a wear on Sonny Crockett here through Colin Farrell's performance here, that I think maybe if he portrayed it a few years later than this, he would have had a little bit more of a natural hang of that type of thing, that sort of weariness of a certain way that is definitely part of the character here that you see in certain moments, that he has a certain gravitas towards getting this relationship with Isabella here, because it's obviously showing us like maybe he's got this sort of a little too seasoned in a certain way. It's like he's been at this for a long time and it's kind of worn on him. He's kind of like looking beyond that point in time where he is now. So it's like you can kind of see those elements there. It's like sometimes it works, like with the sort of gravelly voice he puts on for Crockett here. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't work. I think when it's a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more subdued in a certain way, it does work. But when you got certain scenes where he's going to have to pitch it down more and get a little bit more gruff and a little more heavy and stuff like that, it doesn't quite play as genuine. There's certain points where it's like, it kind of wavers in terms of that quality of how he's holding the weight of the character in, and how he's kind of trying to convey that sensibility about Crockett here, dealing with the personalities that he has between Crockett and the undercover identity of Burnett, where you can kind of see how, as things are kind of going along, they do sort of bleed together. The two different personas here. You can kind of see that, like, when they'd have that second meeting with Fujima, Crockett just kind of snaps out on him. That's Burnett. That's him channeling Burnett in that sort of situation. So it's like all these little things kind of like, as he's getting more passionately involved with the entire situation here, getting deeper in with Isabella and kind of having all these different things that are kind of cross-hatching in his sort of life here. As an undercover, you're taking like what you naturally are and kind of amplifying so many different things about yourself to make it a genuine performance to convince all these criminal underworld people you are who you say you are. So he is very much inhabiting that type of thing, and the different elements of those two different personas are really kind of overlapping and kind of blurring the lines between different things as he's trying to navigate the situation here. What is him as a cop and him as his undercover identity. And I do like Colin Farrell generally in the role. I like everything he goes on, and kind of interesting that he kind of reprises his same look when he had his stint on True Detective Season 2. The same hair, the same mustache, everything. They kind of graded him up a little bit, but it was kind of interesting, like, well, that's an interesting choice you decided to go with on this entire thing, where you're kind of, again, playing another sort of gritty cop drama type of thing that a lot of people didn't think as highly about Season 2 as they did about Season 1, but still kind of an interesting choice he went with there. But regardless of that, I just think Colin Farrell did a good job here, and probably deserves a little bit more credit than he has gotten for his portrayal of Crockett here. It's like, I don't think it's perfect, but it does hit off a lot of really special beats here that I think really drive the emotional momentum of the entire story here. I think he works out very well. But, of course, you got his co-star here of Jamie Foxx as Ricardo Tubbs, and there's a lot of things getting with Jamie Foxx. One, he is a good actor. When he can really dial it in and really nail something very well. Of course, he already worked with Michael Mann on Ali and Collateral. Won his Oscar for playing Ray Charles in Ray right before this, which apparently kind of fueled an ego with him. Because after that happened, even though he'd always signed on to Miami Vice, he decided, well, I need to get top billing on this thing. And I need a pay raise. And reportedly, Colin Farrell had to take a pay cut in order for Jamie Foxx to get paid more money. That's what's been reported. And, of course, our things reported that, like, he wouldn't fight commercial. He had to get a private jet and all these different things. And it's like, a lot of people just felt like he was very difficult to work with. He kind of got an inflated sense about himself and just didn't work very smoothly with a lot of people. Apparently, Michael Mann kind of viewed him more as like a challenge. Michael Mann's not a guy who likes an easy type of thing. He likes to have a little bit of a, not so much a conflict, but he likes to have a little bit of something to kind of like push himself, kind of challenge himself in a certain way. So it's like, if Jamie Foxx is being a little bit more aggressive and assertive in how he feels, like kind of having a little bit more of a arrogance maybe about him, Mann just feels like there's something bigger for him to climb over and kind of achieve in a certain way. But a lot of crew members and certain other people on the entire production didn't feel quite as amicable about the situation. But in terms of performance here, let's give him the guy the credit here, because he is, again, a good actor, and I think he does good things as Ricardo Tubbs. He does have good things. I like, again, hitting off a beat that feels very much echoing what Philip Michael Thomas did as Tubbs, having a certain sense of compassion. I like at the end of that first scene with Fujima there, where they're out in the parking garage, he just says, "Sorry about your men." And that's always felt very much completely in tune with who Tubbs was. He wasn't as jaded, wasn't as cynical as Crockett was in the series. He had a little bit more of that compassion, a little bit more of that heart in regard. So I always liked that beat kind of rang true to me. It kind of resonated for myself. And he's got the smooth savvy and everything like that. He feels like he's got the swagger. He feels like a player. He feels like I can move through this entire scene and feel very much genuine on that regard. Maybe there's a few moments here and there that it feels a little bit more played up to a certain degree. Like, again, when they're having that first scene with Jose Hierro, and sometimes it feels a little off in certain places where they're playing things a little bit more jokey in a certain way, where he's talking about, like, it was a Jackson Pollock painting. It's like Jose Hierro got splattered all over his own wall. Some of those moments feel a little off in terms of the acting performances here and there, but in general, I think he did hit off very good things. And the supposed unrated director's cut, which Michael Mann doesn't recall a specific director's cut, just like sort of a a director-approved alternate revised version, which is not as marketable, but he does get a few extra scenes in the entire film that plays out with his relationship with Trudy, portrayed fantastically by Naomie Harris, who's just an excellent actress. Awesome every time I see her in anything, just completely nails the hell out of everything. But they add a few extra things that kind of strengthen the relationship, kind of reflect on things that kind of foreshadows when she gets abducted later on, the whole thing where Jesus Montoya talks about, like, send my regards to your family and stuff like that. And that follows on with an added scene in that cut of the film where Tubbs calls her up and they have this sort of sit-down meeting in a diner and kind of rest assuring about different things and their worries and stuff like that. So they had a few extra little things, but they didn't really accentuate things as much as you could because they're trying to mainly focus on the Crockett-Isabella storyline and stuff like that. But Foxx does a good job inhabiting the role very nicely, but again, doesn't get as much to deal with. And of course, now that he has the Academy Award and he wants top billing, but he's not really the main featured character in terms of between him and Farrell. Farrell is definitely the one with the bulk of the story to tell in the entire film. So it's kind of an interesting type of thing that it really only was him getting top billing in the U.S. All the international markets reversed and Colin Farrell got top billing everywhere else. But I still think Foxx and him have a good chemistry. Even though they're very, like I said, very minimal in their dialogue interactions, they do have a certain spark between them. I think they really did something really nicely, and despite any kind of problems that are going on with Foxx and having a certain attitude about certain things that people reported on, he's still putting in a very good performance here that I think really hit off in a good way. And of course, rounding out the rest of the Vice, I got Dominic Lombardozzi as Switek. You got Justin Theroux, a fantastic screenwriter who ends up being Larry Zito in this whole thing. You got Elizabeth Rodriguez, who does a really goddamn good job as Gina Calabrese here, just like when she gets in a trailer park scene, she's as convincing as anyone. She is like dead serious badass in that entire sequence. Like, I don't doubt her for a second in that whole thing. But Switek is you don't really get anything really of substance to do in the entire film. So it's like they're there because they're part of the entire team. They're part of the lexicon of Miami Vice, and they fill out their parts in the plot. But they don't really get anything to develop who they are. But regardless of that, our type of thing is like, okay, we got Barry Shabaka Henley, who is a very good actor. Collateral definitely proved that, and Mann had already worked with him on his short-lived TV series, Robbery Homicide Division, which starred Tom Sizemore and didn't last very long, but Lieutenant Mark Castillo was made with such a great sense of gravitas by Edward James Olmos on the series. When he stepped in after they replaced Gregory Sierra as Lou Rodriguez from the first couple episodes, he just changed the tone so much. He brought such a cultural awareness as well. It's like there was so much he brought to his stoic minimalism on the entire series. It got him Emmy nominations. So much. It's like he just really broke through as just like the linchpin that really made the entire formula of Miami Vice work so well. Shabaka Henley, just like he's got a few moments of flex when he's dealing with Fujima there at certain points of time. But it's not as much impact in the entire story. It doesn't feel like there's a much strength in the interpretation of the version of Castillo we get in the film. It just feels a little less than what it could have been, I think. They could have had a little stronger sensibility about the character in a certain way that just give it a little bit more impact on the entire story here. But as it's portrayed, it's fine. It's good. If you don't know about Edward James Olmos before this, it really kind of doesn't make a difference to you. But just knowing what the legacy of that character was, just feel like it deserved a little something extra brought into the mix of things, a little bit more something special injected into the entire performance here with the few scenes he has. I think they could have had a little bit extra here, but going on sort of the flip side of everything here, all the bad guys in the entire film love John Ortiz. He's fantastic. And it's like, he's obviously, he is putting on a different accent for the entire interpretation of your Jose Euro. I think he's fantastic. I think he's just adding so much charisma, so much entertainment value with the type of dialogue he's given, how he gets to work different scenes. I like so much that he's very perceptive. There's always a certain thing nagging about him with Burnett and Cooper here. There's like there's something off about these guys. There's always saying this like he never quite likes these guys. There's something a little too slick about everything, too clean, too polished. Everything's too nice and neat and all that type of stuff. He's probably used to a little bit of a pushback. probably used to having a little bit of a conflict in with certain people in this sort of line of work and stuff like that, having a little bit of a jostling for position or different things like that. A little too easy to deal with. And he's a little bit too tied up neatly in a certain way. And he keeps gnawing at him all these different times. It's like he's going along with it because Montoya said so, because Isabella said so, but no, it's not working out for him. He just knows completely, even though the background checks work out, all this different stuff, shit ain't going right here, and he doesn't like it, and he keeps putting together all these little machinations to build up against them. All this stuff he's working out with the bad guys back on South Florida and stuff like that. All this stuff. I like so much how he is that character who sees that sort of thing forward. He doesn't just look at the data and just doesn't look at the stuff on the computer screen. He sees and feels with his own eyes and stuff like that. He gets that sort of sensibility of certain how these guys work, how they're going about things, how things seem a little too convenient. All this stuff just doesn't sit right with him, and he's just completely right about the entire thing. And so it's like, I like so much how that works with his character and how he has all that chemistry with everyone going on, and how he is kind of a dangerous character in a certain way. How he's able to pull those strings and kind of put these guys in different traps and put them in danger, stuff like that. I like so much how he is that sort of character who moves the mechanics of the entire story around from the background of the entire story here. So like, I like so much how he works the entire story. It works fantastically. I think he's actually wonderful in this entire thing. I've seen him in a couple other roles, but none of them have been quite as juicy as he gets here. He gets a lot of stuff to work with. I think he does a really fine job with everything he's given. And working with Luis Tosar was like, man, this guy is fucking frightening. And he barely has to do anything on screen. He's the exemplification of less is more. You can do it as subtle as possible and just project a certain, just an aura, a presence in a certain way. Just like when you first see him, he's just sitting in the back of that freaking limousine. But the entire aura of you built up around this entire meeting. And then you sit down this thing, he doesn't have to flex anything, he doesn't have to shout, he doesn't have to raise his voice at all. He doesn't have to do anything but how he moves his eyes, and how he looks at certain people at certain points in time. There's just certain things like, it grips you so much that how he just brings a certain weight to the lines that he delivers that just makes it chilling. He's fantastic as Jesus Montoya. I like so much the entire thing where after Jose Hierro shows that security footage of Sonny and Isabella having this very passionate dance, I've seen that the relationship is not so much like she's scouting him and he's scouting her and kind of having this sort of thing here. It's not business. It's very, very personal and intimate. And how they just zoom in on the back of his head as he's watching this, and the music swells up, stuff like that. It's just a perfect moment to really sell the seething quality of the character here. And it's such an interesting thing in that regard. It's like he does such a great job with not having a ton to work with, but even that one scene he has in the bedroom with Isabel there, portrayed by Gong Li, just like, it has a very different complexion and everything. It just shows a different flavor of the entire character here. And it kind of shifts here and there about his mood and his intentions and stuff like that. How he doesn't have to do a whole lot to show a lot. I like so much how his performance works out so very well here. And just like, Gong Li also has some good stuff, even though she did not speak fluent English. But the lines were translated into, I believe, Mandarin for it, so she did understand what she was saying, had an emotional context and dramatic context for what she was saying in a phonetic English statement. Even though her English dialogue in the entire film isn't quite as good, I still think that her and Colin Farrell do have a certain level of chemistry. I think there is certainly something there. I don't think it comes to a full fruition where everything saturates to the very highest extent could. I think there is a certain magnetism between the two characters, between the two actors. I think there is something there. It does hit off something, but I don't think the entire story doesn't quite fully convince me all the way. It doesn't get me fully all the way. I think that maybe just as a fault of just like, you don't really know anything much about Crockett outside of his Burnett persona all that much. You don't know where he's been, what's hanging over him, what his history is. So like I said, the film doesn't need to bog you down with a lot of that, but you don't have quite as much context where Crockett has been and what things are happening with him on a personal level to know what this relationship really deeply means to him. But I still think the chemistry and the different scenes they have together do have a certain sensibility that do hit off on a very strong electrical, charismatic level. I think they do have a lot of good things to go off. I think she does a very good job with everything she is given here, with the hurdle she has in terms of the language barrier and stuff like that. I still think she did some good stuff in this film with Colin Farrell, also again with Louis Tosar in those few scenes they have together. It all comes off very well. I like so much that she is a very intelligent woman. She does get involved with Sonny Burnett because she is also kind of scoping him out. What is he really all about? If he's going to kind of let her in a little bit and try to kind of do some moves on her in a certain way to kind of negotiate something else, what is she going to try and learn about him? Where it's all kind of a fact-finding mission, but they kind of fall into this entire sort of situation where they are very passionately involved. It gets all kind of blurred out in a certain way, and all the things get a little bit more accentuated in how the risks that they're taking are a little bit more than they ever expected to get into. So I think she is written as a very good role that has a lot of good agency about herself and a very intelligent sensibility as well. So I like so much about that. Generally, the cast is very solid. It's very solid type of stuff that comes off very well towards the tones that Michael Mann was going for in this whole thing. A lot of people maybe don't like as much of the interpretations of the classic characters in this film, but I think for what Michael Mann was going for and all the different things he was trying to hit off with this story, I think everyone in the cast really did a very fine job of it. And of course, something else completely updated for this entire film was the music used in it, because Jan Hammer was not approached to even be involved with the entire film, so they consciously were moving away from that sound and that style and those themes used in the entire series, and employed someone like John Murphy to kind of bring a lot of dark ambiance to the entire film, with a lot of brooding sensibilities and those cues that he used in the entire film, and also a lot of contemporary acts, including Audioslave, whom Michael Mann had utilized on Collateral, and they contributed 2 songs, which I believe was from their final album, Revelations, but Shape of Things to Come and Wide Awake are very good tracks. That really adds to the extras. It's like Mann utilizes their music very regularly throughout the entire film, showing how much you really appreciated Chris Cornell's vocals, Tom Morello's guitar work, all these different things. They're a really good goddamn band, and they really just captured a sensibility that was very much on the pulse of what Michael Mann really wanted to exude for the entire film. I think so much of the entire musical landscape does aid towards that. Not everything is a winner for me. Not every track that they put in this thing isn't that really appeals to me, but I think it still mainly works for the atmosphere, the tone that they're going for here. So it's like it still hits off these sort of feelings that you want going on with all the more darker, more dangerous, a little bit more threatening type of things going on in the entire film, and certain other little lighter vibes here and there. So all the different things that go between the dangerous stuff and the much more sort of romanticized type of things going on in the entire film between Isabella and Sonny, I think it all comes off very well through the music. And so my big thing with this entire film, going through this extensive exploration and reevaluation, is that my opinion has morphed over time with this film. When I sat in a theater for a midnight screening in 2006, I was very disappointed in the film because I only discovered the TV series a year prior through the DVD releases, and leading up to the film, I'm marathoning everything, I'm watching it, I'm getting excited by the TV spots and trailers, which again, don't accurately reflect the style of movie that Michael Mann has made here. But still, when I sat down and I was going through the film and getting up to the end of the whole film, it was a weird experience where it was like, okay, it's a very strange, offbeat type of ending, where it's like it kind of leaves you hanging on this weird downbeat note, where you got all the stuff that happens where you've already taken care of Euro and there's all those people, but you got Trudy in the hospital with Tubbs, and you got Sonny out with Isabella trying to get her out of the country and stuff like that, and the film just ends with Crockett just having this random walk into the hospital, then you cut to black. And I was just like, I just remember this night, the exact theater I was in, the exact mindset I was in. It's like, I'm walking through the theater after the film has ended, but I really haven't gotten an ending to the film. I don't think I feel like I got a catharsis, sort of resolution to the story, and there was a lot of things I kept feeling over the years, like, first I was like disappointed, then after I got the DVD, I was like, okay, I've listened to Mann's commentary. I kind of gotten a feel for an appreciation of what he was trying to do here. But then a couple years go by and it's like, that feels kind of dated, or doesn't feel like it's quite all that interesting. It feels like it's trying to be too cutting edge and too much like, oh, we're steps ahead of everyone else at this point in time in terms of the technology you're using in the entire film to tell the story and all these little things. I kept having weird steps where I looked at the film and had different opinions and had different feelings about it. And it's kind of the interesting thing. Once I got into this entire thing and started looking at all the pieces of behind-the-scenes information about how there were personality conflicts and there were tensions on set where a lot of people didn't like how Mann was running the set. He was very much kind of maybe not so much a forceful guy, but it's like he was a very demanding type of guy. And people aren't kind of gung-ho for everything that he's going for, then they're on the wrong film set. So like there's a lot of stuff like that where, again, the whole thing with Jamie Foxx, after he got scared off from that incident on set, Michael Mann has further gone on record in more recent years saying that once that actually happened, they got shut down, basically. They kind of lost all their access in that triple frontier of Argentina, Paraguay, and Brazil. So all their social engineering they went through to kind of make everything happen, now they're kind of went out the window after that incident happened. And so it was kind of a two-shot deal in that regard. Just like things just went off where Fox isn't coming back, and now they gotten kind of pushed out of the entire situation here. So it was a whole thing where Mann was like, originally had an ending set in Miami, then they had one set in Paraguay, they went back to the one in Miami, then back to Paraguay. But then once the production mishaps started happening, he was forced to just go back to the one set for Miami, which is basically from the first draft of the screenplay, which is basically the only one you can find online now. So it's like all this stuff happened, and just like there was so many different weird conflicts and all these different little things where it's like nothing was entirely going the way it was supposed to be going. Even though if he's a demanding filmmaker, most of them can usually get what they want, but when everything else is going wrong with the weather and the production things where you're dealing with foreign countries and having to deal with all these different things, it all starts falling apart. And even like one day their production offices in Miami get pretty much shut down. It's like there was a storm and the power went out and things got destroyed. A lot of things went up in the air. And Mann had to kind of scramble together to get everything put back together so they could get some stuff shot here and there. It was very much a trial by fire production that really caused a lot of adverse things to happen to the final version of the film. Because, as there's sometimes you look at TV spots and trailers and so like, oh, there's a couple of shots in here that didn't end up in the final film. It's a little more telling on this one, where it's a few pieces of footage eked out that were already cut from the film, but according to 2 test screening reviews that were done several months before the actual proper release of the film, there was an additional subplot that got cut out along with an extra action sequence. Because the character of Neptune, the pimp they were going after at the beginning of the film there at the nightclub, he was apparently going to be marked by the Vice Squad to be the guy who stole the original load at the beginning of the film when they do the whole thing with the Creole accents and blow the boats up. They were going to nail it on him and kind of do this sort of backdoor justice type of thing. And you can tell because, one, there's a TV spot with a very brief clip of Neptune bounding gagged, and you can see Jose Hierro's striped black and white shirt over the shoulder of it. And there's a visual effects reel that's been online since probably about 2007 or so, from I think Illusion FX, that shows a shot that does end up in the actual film where Sonny Crockett is painted out of the shot, probably explaining things about what happened with this set of people who stole the load, trying to blame it on Neptune. And this entire thing also ties into the whole thing of Neptune's people got this word through all the different machinations on the street that the Vice Squad lays out. They try to hijack the load. Big shootout in furs and all this type of stuff. So it's like, it was from the reviews, they said at least that sequence, that action sequence, overshadowed the actual end sequence that we got in the final versions of the film. So there's a very interesting line of different things. Like, okay, they shot certain things, But after maybe test screening reviews like that, or various other things happened where production got kind of shut out at different places where they probably maybe could have shot some connective tissue to really make everything fit together, or maybe there was just a pacing issue, didn't kind of flow properly with the pacing of the entire film. It's hard to understand because no one's really addressed this type of stuff. We all kind of got this stuff leaked out from little different pieces of footage and sources and people kind of patching things together over the years to try to figure out what really was going on here, because again, can't find anything but the first draft of the screenplay online. There've been many other drafts that went through before they got to a shooting script. And like I said, Mann was rewriting things on set. So that makes for a very difficult thing to deconstruct here. And the fact of the matter is, the ending we got is not the ending that we were supposed to have in the film, like I said. Because the one in Paraguay they were originally going to go for was going to be like the vice cops all go off in this sort of rogue mission in a certain way to try to regain Isabella from the clutches of Montoya and Jose Hierro, stuff like that. They would have stormed all of Montoya's entire compound there, the entire house he had for the entire film that had all those armed guards or anything. That would have blown up to a major conflict. And that kind of mirrors what I kind of was feeling like the entire film was building up to when I was in that midnight screening back in 2006. It felt like, okay, they're kind of licking their wounds, where Trudy's kind of coming out of the coma, and Isabella's kind of gone off and trying to make her secluded and everything like that. I felt there was going to be like Calderon's Return Part 2, where Rico and Sonny, they've been dealing with the big bad guy they've had since the pilot. He's come back, tried to kill a bunch of people on the hit list, which included Crockett, but failed and ended up killing Lou Rodriguez, their lieutenant. And they were going to go down to the Bahamas on the speedboat and trying to go for pretty much a revenge mission. Take the guy out. Any means necessary type of thing. Which was apparently the actual idea was there before they landed on the entire thing, where Hierro goes back to Miami and they had the old meet and the shootout, stuff like that. So it's like, okay, that's what I figured it was going to be, and that's what it really kind of was going to be. And so like they didn't end up doing that. And the fact of the matter is, even though that climax is fantastically shot, Michael Mann knows how to do a shootout and knows the exact tactics these types of law enforcement people would employ to flank people off and do this sort of way to kind of narrow the field of vision for where they can actually fire off and defend themselves, stuff like that. That's completely in line with everything that he would research and figure out, all these stuff from like Manhunter, Heat, stuff like that. It's all kind of figured out there, and it's fantastically shot, fantastically put together. Michael Mann does handheld action sequences pretty much better than anybody else. Better than Paul Greengrass can do, better than anyone else, because you never lose a geography, even in this dark setting, exactly who's doing what, where everyone is, and all the relation to everything else. You know the context, you know the progression of the story and all that type of stuff. He's fantastic at it. It's a great sequence, but it always felt anticlimactic to me, because it didn't feel like a catharsis. Okay, Hierro's kind of the annoying sort of middleman. Montoya's the guy who's running the whole show. He doesn't really need Hierro. Killing Hierro doesn't stop his organization. It just means he's got to restructure things, kind of move things around, and set up base somewhere else. So that's kind of the ending that we get inferred here, that after everything goes down, and again, this entire montage at the end of the film, they're storming Montoya's place, but everything's cleared out. There's no one there, and he's just gone. So the original ending was going to have the entire blow up and a big sequence where all that stuff really kind of gets wiped out and dealt with, and you have that kind of resolution there. So how all this stuff completely it was like almost like wrong time to do the entire thing. Just all this stuff went off in the wrong directions, hindered the production all the way. Even though at the time the film was released, he was saying like, oh, well, the ending we end up shooting ends up being better than the one we had planned. Well, it was like, you can kind of take with an odd context, because like he's saying that like a week or two before the film was actually being released. So he's not going to badmouth the film saying, hey, we had a better ending plan for this thing, but we had problems and we couldn't really do it. We had to settle for something else. He's not going to do that, because that's going to tank his film. It's going to be bad PR for himself and everyone else on the film. It wouldn't shine anyone on very well. So it's kind of the interesting thing that you'd have to get a much more recent sort of retrospective feel from him about that thing. But he still kind of looks at the films like there's a lot of things that didn't go quite right, and he probably would approach things in a different fashion or kind of try to go in a different way in certain places. Did kind of try to do a little bit of revisionist type of thing when you had the unrated director's cut, because obviously it didn't make a lot of money theatrically. The universe, okay, if you want to go have a second stab at this, go ahead and see what you can do, because we know there's certain other pieces of footage and certain other things that were shot that you could probably reintegrate or chop some things out you don't feel quite work. So you got the unrated director's cut, which I said is not like an official, proper, like this is my definitive version of it. But the fact of the matter is, they added the whole thing with the boat sequence, having opening title credits, which I think it's a fine sequence. I just think I just like the more hard, cold open type of thing, but added a few extra things here and there that really don't add up a whole lot to anything, but they did a nice thing at the end of the whole film where Sonny takes Isabella away from the entire shootout sequence, and she has this kind of fit in the car when they're driving across the interstate or something like that. And it's just an emotional moment of just kind of like externalize what she's feeling in the entire moment, because she's felt deceived and betrayed and all this type of stuff. So it's like there's a complex emotions going on. So there's nice tussle they have there in the car that feels like it just has a little something out there to kind of grapple with the entire situation there. And the other things they add in with like Tubbs and Trudy and stuff like that, like I said, I don't feel like it really gets followed up on until they get to the abduction sequence. So it's like I don't think it added as much as it could have. And so they did a few little trims here and there and a few little additions here and there. But when he got into the entire climax, he actually decided to flip something around here, because in the original theatrical cut, the entire end shootout is just this nice, brooding, dark piece of score that pretty much John Murphy, I think he put that one together, and it works wonderfully. But for the unrated version, he decided to go for putting non-points cover of In the Air Tonight over, and it just never works for me in that sequence. It just doesn't feel like it fits the tone, the vibe. It feels like almost an anomaly. I don't mind it being on the end credits where it doesn't really make a difference to the actual storytelling context. But so much of things like, okay, Mann has gone through such pains on this entire film to not bring back Jan Hammer, to reuse any of his music on the series. You've moved away from the aesthetics of the entire show. The tone has gotten much darker. And a lot of other different things. It just made a very conscious choice to not replicate what the series was. To make it take the same elements but make it entirely different, new, updated, contemporary version of it. But you make this very conscious choice to throw back to this very iconic, fantastic pilot episode sequence that kind of like changed television the instant it happened. How that sequence went off, and just like the way they used the music from Phil Collins, the emotion, the context, the cinematic visuals, all these different things, it gave you something on television you had never seen before. And you can't really just take a random cover that had been out for a little bit while and just slap it on there. It's like, it doesn't have the rhythm, it doesn't have the style, it doesn't have the tone of it. It just feels very strange to throw it in there. And some people, from what Mann says, like some people kind of pushed back against it, felt like it was a bad idea to kind of throw it in there. Don't do that. So on this revised version, he decided to do that, but I do prefer the theatrical version with the John Murphy brooding score underneath it. I think it works much more effectively. So with this Miami Vice movie, I've had like 15 years to sit with this and kind of feel it out and have all these different perspectives and feelings kind of shift around all this different time. And it did take going through this very extensive evaluation to really kind of decide I kind of like the film now. Now that I've had to watch it multiple times getting up to this video and getting into all the dirt of it, I don't hate it anymore. I don't think I really hated it at any point in time, actually, but I actually kind of like it. I don't think it's perfect. There are definitely flaws in the whole thing. Again, I still think the ending just feels a little like dangling threads. And nothing really gets tied up. It's just like everything just kind of gets wasted away. It's a very nihilistic ending to a certain degree, which you can go for. Mann doesn't have to tie everything up in a nice bow. It doesn't have to be like a summer blockbuster action type of thing that you get on a random basis. He tells the stories he wants to tell. Not all of them have the best endings to them, but usually there is a catharsis at the end of it. And I feel like the film really kind of got there because, again, there's a lot of these production issues going on that hindered everything they wanted to do with it. So you had to take something from this script and take it from this draft and rewrite this stuff here and there and kind of jockey around to figure out what we're going to do. And this storm hits and they get kicked out of this country. And it's a good piece of work. Despite, I mean, a lot of lesser filmmakers would have crumbled under it. Michael Mann did not crumble under it, but I think it's still a film that does morph with the times in a certain way, depending on what your disposition is, what you're looking for in the film, what your expectations are. It can take on a different complexion, as any film can. But so much on this film, where I've loved so many of Michael Mann's films, from Thief and Manhunter and Heat and Collateral, all this stuff. A lot of good films, a lot of great films, excellent films. This one's taken 15 years for me to kind of come around. I was like, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's got really good qualities. So I love, again, Colin Farrell's really good in it. I like the chemistry, the magnetism between him and Gong Li. I like some of the brooding stuff in the entire film. Like, not all of it's 100% killer type of thing for me now, but I can appreciate it and enjoy it a lot more than I ever have before. Again, that first 20 minutes always kills me, but it's like, I think it's okay. I think it's okay. Just like, again, all I can say is there are problems with it. There are issues with it. There are things in it that I think Michael Mann, probably if he did it today, would approach it in yet another way. He would try to go in different type of ways, but he's always that guy who always wants to get that gritty realism of being in the space, in the reality of the entire thing, and that really pushed the limits of a lot of different people on set and all these different things and what they could and could not do. So it's like, it was a good attempt at a contemporary update of the Miami Vice brand. It just didn't quite gel with it. They didn't market it terribly well. They tried to make it seem like it's something it wasn't. And when people sat in the theater and they didn't get what they were marketed, that didn't create a lot of repeat business. But apparently the film made a lot of money on home video, and it only released the unrated director's cut on Blu-ray in the U.S. The theatrical cut got released overseas, which there was a region-free version from the U.K., but if you want to pick up the 2-pack set, which has Miami Vice and The Kingdom of film Michael Mann actually produced, Mill Creek did put both of those out in a double pack, which does have the original theatrical cut of Miami Vice, but has no bonus features whatsoever. So you can grab the UK version, or you can grab that much more budgeted release from Mill Creek that will give you that version. But I think maybe online on streaming services you can find that theatrical cut. So just bounce around trying to find things, look for it here and there. But I would like to hear what you guys feel about both versions of the film, which one you have much more of a preference for, which one kind of feels like it works better, and various other little things in the whole lexicon of this film. Just like there's been an incredibly deep video to go through, and obviously from the length of it, you definitely have seen that so much. So, I've been playing this for a long time, and I had to go through a lot of weird different areas of the entire web to find all the little smatterings of pieces of information to figure out what happened behind the scenes of this film. And it became such a fascinating thing, I just had to get up to the point where I covered it in this fashion and redid a video I did all the way back at the beginning of this entire Forever Cinematic Reviews stuff on the channel back in 2013. This feels much more proper. This feels a lot more right. And I got nothing else to say. So guys, thanks much. Take care. Give me some comments about the film and all these other things below. And there's always the Patreon. So take care.